Rain doesn't just fall in the forest. It listens. At night, when headlights are the only thing cutting through the trees, some highways stop being roads and become traps. These are not campfire stories. These are real truckers, real routes, and moments that followed them long after the engine shut off. Tonight, you're about to hear the most disturbing rainy forest trucker horror stories ever reported. Once you start listening, don't look away from the road. It was my third run that week up through Oregon, timber country, rain country, the kind of route that makes your wipers feel like they're working overtime just to keep you honest. I've been driving close to 11 years. Long enough to know the difference between quiet and wrong. Quiet is an empty interstate at noon. Wrong is a forest highway at 2:30 a.m. where the trees lean in so tight the sky disappears, and the rain hits your windshield with that hard, gritty sound like someone's throwing handfuls of gravel. That night I was in my Freightliner Cascadia, nothing fancy, but reliable. Loaded light, packaged paper goods out of Eugene, headed north toward a distribution yard outside Portland. My logbook was clean. My fuel was good. Thermos of burnt gas station coffee in the cup holder. Phone in the cradle with maps muted. Dash lights turned down low so my eyes could work the road. Highway was slick and black, reflecting my headlights in long smeared ribbons. Fog sat in pockets between the pines, thick enough that the beams didn't cut through so much as disappear into it. And for nearly 50 miles, I didn't see another vehicle. No oncoming whites. No red taillights ahead. No deer eyes in the shoulder brush. Just wet asphalt, guardrail, and those shadowed trunks on either side like pillars. The only sound was my engine's steady pull and the rhythmic squeak of the wipers. Every so often, the air brakes sighed when I eased off the throttle for a curve. Diesel smell clung to the cab, mixed with damp fabric and stale coffee. The heater pushed warm air at my ankles, but the cold outside still felt like it had fingers on the glass. That's when the CB came alive. Not the usual breaker 19 or some board chatter. It didn't fade in like a weak signal either. It snapped into my cab, loud and clean, as if the voice was sitting in the passenger seat. "Can anybody hear me?" A man, middle-aged, maybe, calm voice, too calm. No panic in it, no shaking, no adrenaline. Just controlled, like he'd practiced sounding normal. I lifted my mic without thinking. Truckers do that. You hear a voice in the dark, you answer, because there's always a chance it's real trouble. "Yeah, I got you," I said. "You all right, driver?" There was a soft click of static, then the same voice. "My rig stalled. I'm just ahead. I can't see the road anymore." That set off the first little alarm in my head. If you're just ahead and you're stalled, you're throwing hazards. You're banging on the air horn. You're waving a flashlight. You're doing something to keep another truck from plowing into you. I eased off the throttle and started scanning. My eyes swept the lane, then the shoulder. I looked for the faint orange blink of hazards. Looked for a reflective trailer stripe. Looked for the silhouette of a cab angled wrong. Nothing. Just trees. Rain. Fog. "Where you at?" I asked. "Give me a mile marker." He hesitated. Not long. Just long enough to feel like he was listening to something. Then he said, "Mile marker, 72. I glanced at my right mirror out of habit, then down at the little green mile marker sign coming up on the shoulder. It said 72. I felt my grip tighten on the wheel. My hands were dry, but my palms suddenly felt like they'd started sweating under the skin. "Copy," I said, keeping my voice even because that's what you do. "What's your truck look like? You got hazards on." Silence. Only my engine, the wipers, the hiss of rain. Then the CB crackled again. Same voice. Lower volume now, like he'd leaned closer to a mic. "I don't have hazards." That was wrong on a few levels. Even if your electrical's shot, you still say, "I can't get M to work." You don't just state it like a fact. I rolled past the mile marker and slowed more, eyes digging into the fog ahead, waiting for the shape of a dead rig to appear. Nothing. The forest pressed in. The road bent left. My headlights washed over wet guardrail and the glistening skin of blacktop. "Driver," I said, "I'm not seeing you. You sure you're ahead of me?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his words came out strange. Not slurred. Not drunk. Just careful, like he was reading. "You're alone," he said. "No lights behind you. No lights ahead." I stared at the dark road like it might suddenly explain itself. "Yeah," I muttered, more to myself than him. "That's about right." Then he said, "Your coffee cup is in the right holder. White lid." My throat tightened. There's nothing magical about a coffee cup. It's a cup. Every trucker's got one. But he described it like he was seeing it. I flicked my eyes down for half a second and saw exactly what he'd said. My cup, the lid streaked with a brown coffee ring, sitting where it always sat. I told myself it was coincidence. That he'd guessed. That he was messing with me. Guys on late-night CB can be bored and cruel. Especially out in dead zones where they know there's only one driver listening. Still, my cab felt smaller after that, like the walls had moved an inch inward. "Who is this?" I asked. Static. A low, steady crackle, almost like breathing through a bad mic. Then quieter. "You don't want to stop." My eyes snapped back to the road. My heart was doing that slow, heavy punch it does when your body decides there's danger before your brain has caught up. I should have done what any sane driver would do. Switch channels, power down, keep rolling. But something about the calmness in his voice kept my finger off the switch. Like I didn't want to make it angry. "Look," I said. "If you're broke down, give me your company plate, something. I'll call it in." Another pause. Then, "You're heading north. Paper load." That wasn't a guess. That was my reality. A cold thread crawled up my spine, and I turned my dash lights down another notch like it could hide me. The CB clicked again. "Your seat seam is torn on the left side," he said. "Little foam showing." My left thigh pressed against that seam. I'd noticed it 100 times. I'd never said it out loud. I could feel the heater warming my legs, but the rest of me went cold. I took a long look at my passenger seat. Empty, black fabric, rain-smeared window beyond it. "Stop talking," I said, and my voice came out flatter than I meant. "What do you want?" The static changed, sharper now, like the signal had tightened. "I need help," he said. "I can't see the road." "I'm right there." I drove another quarter mile, leaning forward, eyes straining through fog and rain, and still no rig, no wreck, no stalled trailer, not even fresh skid marks or debris. Nothing disturbed, just wet road and trees. My mind started searching for explanations the way it always does when reality doesn't add up. Maybe he's on a spur road and thinks I'm on his highway. Maybe he's behind me and the signal's bouncing weird in the hills. Maybe someone's using a repeater. Maybe it's a recorded message. Then he said something that wasn't explanation. He said, "Don't look in your mirror." I did anyway, not because I wanted to, because my body reacted before my judgment could stop it. My right mirror showed my trailer, the faint outline of the box, spray fanning off the tires into darkness. My left mirror showed wet lane line and the guardrail. No headlights, but in the center mirror, mounted above my windshield, there was a shape that didn't belong. A smear of darkness behind the glass, like a shadow inside the cab that wasn't cast by anything. For a split second, it looked like someone sitting in the bunk area, just behind my seat, where the sleepers are. My breath caught so hard it hurt. I snapped my eyes forward and kept them there, hands locked on the wheel. My cab lights flickered. Not a full blackout, just a stutter, like the electrical system got tapped. The CB came alive again, and now the voice sounded closer than the speaker. It wasn't louder, just closer, like the signal had shortened the distance to my ear. "I can smell your diesel," he said softly. I swallowed, jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. "Shut up," I whispered. There was a pause. Then the voice changed, not in tone but in age. The same calm, the same steadiness. But suddenly it sounded older, like the recording had been dragged through time. "Please," it said, "if you stop, you'll see what's in the trees." A gust hit the truck broadside, pushing spray across my windshield. The wipers struggled for a second. The road dipped and turned, and the forest on the right opened just enough to show a pullout. Gravel, dark, empty. and standing in the pullout just inside my headlight spill was a man. Not reflective gear, not a rain jacket, just a pale, still figure facing the road. He didn't wave, didn't raise a hand, didn't move at all. My brain tried to make him into a hitchhiker, a stranded driver, somebody needing help. But he was too still, too perfectly placed, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. He was standing right where my headlights would catch him at the last second, where a tired driver would slam brakes on wet road and jackknife. I didn't touch my brakes. I kept rolling, hand steady, engine pulling. As I passed him, I turned my head just enough to see his face. It was blurred by rain and speed, but I saw the outline. Hollow eyes, mouth slightly open, like he was mid-sentence or mid-breath. My cab lights flickered again. The CB hissed, and the voice returned, now thin and distant, like it was coming from a far tunnel. "That's me," it said. I felt my throat close. My heart hammered like it was trying to get out. I reached for the CB power knob and killed it. The cab went quieter instantly. No static, no voice, just the engine and rain. The silence after the CB felt heavy, like a door had shut. But the relief didn't come, because even with the radio off, I could still feel something in the cab with me. An awareness like a pressure change, like the air had become crowded. I drove hard until dawn, didn't stop at the next rest area, didn't slow for the usual scenic pullouts. I kept my eyes forward, scanning for headlights, scanning for signs, scanning for anything normal. When the sky finally started to lighten, a dull gray bleeding into the tree line, I hit a way station outside Salem to get my paperwork checked and my tires off that haunted stretch of wet road. The station lights were harsh and yellow, buzzing in the drizzle. It smelled like wet concrete and diesel exhaust. The building was warm in that stale way government buildings are: old coffee, disinfectant, damp coats. I walked in, shoulders tight, and handed over my documents. While the guy behind the counter checked my logbook, another driver came in behind me. Older guy, gray beard, rain jacket dripping. He glanced at me like he recognized something in my face. "You run through the woods last night?" he asked casually, like he was asking about traffic. I didn't answer right away. Then I nodded once. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You hear the overnight broadcast?" My stomach tightened again. "What broadcast?" I asked. He tilted his head toward the corner of the room, where a small radio was mounted on a shelf, low volume. It was playing a local station, news, weather, traffic. "They replay it sometimes," he said. "Late night emergency call. Comes over CB too. Folks say it bleeds into the channels out there when the rain's heavy." I felt the room tilt slightly, like my body was remembering something my mind didn't want. "What call?" I asked. The older driver's eyes narrowed. He looked like he regretted bringing it up, but he said it anyway. "Driver 20 years back," he murmured. "Stalled out on that stretch. Fog so thick he couldn't see the shoulder. Called for help. Kept saying he couldn't see the road anymore." My lips went dry. "He never made it out," the driver added. "They found his rig wrapped around a tree down in a ravine. Said he got spooked and cut the wheel. Some folks say he stopped because he thought he saw someone in the pullout." My hands started to shake, just a little, enough that I tucked them into my jacket pockets. "And they replay it?" I asked. The older driver nodded. "Anniversary thing. Local legend. Cops, tow guys, everybody's heard it. Some nights it plays on the radio like a PSA. Some nights," he shrugged. "Some nights it finds a mic." I walked out of the station with my paperwork and stood under the awning, rain tapping on metal above my head. My truck sat in the lot, solid and real, steam rising off the hood. The sky was pale now. Daylight. Normal. I climbed back into my cab and sat there for a long moment without starting the engine. Then I looked down at my CB. The power knob was still turned off, but the speaker gave one soft, final crackle, like a throat clearing in the dark. And in that tiny burst of static, I heard a whisper I didn't have to strain to recognize. "Thanks for not stopping. I never run that forest stretch at night anymore. And I don't answer unknown voices on the CB, because out there, In the rain, sometimes you're not the only one listening. I was already tired when I hit the Washington Forest Corridor. One of those long, narrow stretches where the highway cuts through state land and the trees feel close enough to scrape your mirrors. Midnight had just passed. The rain was coming down hard. Not the polite drizzle you can drive through, but thick sheets that slapped the windshield and made the wipers feel slow no matter what speed I set them to. I've been driving long haul for over a decade. Reefer, dry van, flatbed, I've hauled all of it. That night I was pulling a 48-foot drive in northbound, mixed freight out of Tacoma, heading toward a drop near Bellingham before cutting east in the morning. Truck was a Kenworth T680, steady engine, no issues on the pre-trip. I'd fueled an hour earlier, grabbed stale coffee that still burned my tongue, and planned to push through the storm to make time. The cab was warm, almost stuffy, heater humming at my feet. Outside was cold and soaked, rain hammering metal, fog clinging low between the firs. My headlights carved two pale tunnels through the darkness, but everything beyond them collapsed into black. The road felt wrong almost immediately. Not broken, not damaged, just narrow, like the forest had leaned in since the last time I ran that route. Guardrails flashed silver and vanished. The reflective lines bled in the rain. Every curve came a half-second sooner than expected. My CB was dead quiet. No chatter. No road reports. Just static when I keyed the mic to check. That's when I saw him. He stood on the right shoulder, just beyond the white line, facing away from the road. Tall, thin silhouette, dark jacket soaked through. No hood. No raincoat. No reflective tape. He wasn't hitchhiking, no thumb out, no movement at all. Just standing there, looking into the trees. I eased off the throttle instinctively. Anyone out here at this hour, in this weather, sets off alarms. My eyes scanned for a stalled car, a pullout, something to explain him. There was nothing. As I rolled closer, I expected him to react, to step back, turn his head, flinch at the sound of 40 tons of steel coming past. He didn't. I passed him at 45 miles an hour, rain roaring, engine humming. My headlights washed over his back for a split second, dark fabric plastered to a narrow frame, and then he was gone behind me. I checked my side mirror. He was closer than he should have been. Not running, not chasing, just closer, like he'd taken several steps forward in the instant it took me to pass. I told myself it was the rain. Depth distortion. Mirrors lie at night. I kept driving. The forest swallowed the road again. Trees packed tight, branches bending under the rain. My wipers squealed on the upstroke. The smell of wet asphalt seeped into the cab, mixing with diesel and old coffee. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my shoulders felt tight, raised without me noticing. A mile passed, then I saw him again. Same shoulder, same posture, facing the trees. This time his head was tilted slightly, like he was listening to something deeper in the woods. My heart kicked harder. I slowed more than I meant to, eyes locked on him as I approached. "Get out of the road," I muttered under my breath, though he wasn't in it. As I passed, I glanced sideways. His face was pale, too pale for someone standing in freezing rain. His eyes were open, but unfocused, looking past the trees, not at them. I checked the mirror again. He was closer, close enough that I could make out his feet. Bare. They were planted in the wet gravel, skin dark with mud. I hit the accelerator. The engine responded, steady and strong. The road straightened briefly, then bent again. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield for a second before the defroster cleared it. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe there were multiple people. Maybe fatigue was messing with me. I keyed the CB. "Anyone running northbound through the corridor?" Static answered. Long, empty static. The silence felt heavy, like the forest was absorbing sound. The third time I saw him, my hands started shaking. He stood closer to the lane now, boots or bare feet, just inches from the white line. Same tilt to the head. Same stillness. Rain streaming down his face like tears. He didn't blink away. As I passed him, his head turned. Not toward me, toward my trailer. I didn't look in the mirror that time. I drove until the green glow of a rest stop sign cut through the rain like a promise. I pulled in hard, tires hissing on wet pavement, air brakes sighing louder than usual as I came to a stop. The rest stop was nearly empty. A couple of cars idling, one other semi parked dark. The building lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off puddles. I killed the engine and sat there, hands on the wheel, listening to the rain drum on the cab roof. The silence inside felt fragile, like it might crack if I moved wrong. After a minute, I grabbed my jacket and stepped down. Cold hit me immediately, sharp, soaking. The smell of wet earth was strong here, carried off the trees that surrounded the lot. I walked toward the restroom building, boots splashing. Inside, the attendant, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, looked up from behind the counter. "You all right?" she asked, not unkindly. "Yeah," I said, then paused. "Actually, no." She waited. "There's a guy walking the shoulder back there," I said. "Barefoot. Been seeing him every mile or so." Her expression changed, not shock, not confusion. Recognition. She didn't speak right away, just glanced toward the window, where rain streaked down the glass. "Storm brings them out," she said finally. "Them?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Repeat walkers." The term landed wrong, too casual for what I'd seen. "Drivers report figures during heavy rain," she continued. "Always alone, always quiet. They don't move forward like normal people." My mouth felt dry. "I saw the same guy 3 times. She nodded once. "They reset." I stared at her. "Reset how?" She lowered her voice. "Same stretch, same posture, always closer by the end." A chill crawled up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "What happens if—" I stopped myself. "Never mind." She shook her head. "Most drivers don't stop to ask." I went back to my truck with rain soaking my jacket, heart pounding harder with every step. The forest around the rest stop felt thicker than before, shadows deep and layered. Before climbing in, I did a walk around. My trailer lights were fine, tires solid, no damage. Then I saw the ground. Mud tracked the pavement in a loose circle around my trailer. Not boot prints, footprints. Bare. They pointed inward. Every single one. I climbed back into the cab fast and locked the doors. My breath came shallow, fogging the glass again. The cab felt smaller now, like the walls were listening. I didn't stay long enough to finish the coffee. I pulled out, tires rolling over puddles, and merged back onto the highway. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it felt heavier, louder. The forest closed in again. I watched the shoulders with everything I had. For 10 miles, there was nothing. Then my headlights caught movement. Not on the shoulder. In the trees. Between the trunks, pale shapes shifted. Faces half visible, bodies just out of full view. Not walking. Not standing. Watching. My chest tightened. I focused on the road, forced my breathing slow. The truck hummed, steady and real beneath me. The CB crackled once. I nearly jumped out of my seat. No voice followed, just a soft pop of static, like a test signal. I reached for the power knob and shut it off. The road eventually widened. The trees thinned. Dawn crept in gray and dull, rain turning lighter, almost polite again. When I finally cleared the corridor, my shoulders dropped an inch without me telling them to. I delivered the load late and didn't explain why. Weeks later, I overheard 2 drivers talking at a fuel island. One mentioned footprints, another mentioned rain. I didn't join the conversation. I just finished fueling and got back on the road. Because I still run Washington. I just don't drive forest corridors at night in the rain anymore. And when I pass a man standing still on the shoulder, facing the trees, I don't slow down. The sign came out of the rain like a promise. Rest area 1 mile. I remember gripping the wheel a little tighter when I saw it. Not because I was nervous, but because I was tired in that dangerous way that creeps up on you after too many hours of white lines and wipers. I'd been running through the Appalachian corridor since early evening, hauling dry freight eastbound. Nothing urgent enough to justify pushing this hard except the quiet pressure drivers put on themselves to keep moving. It was close to 1:40 a.m. The rain had been nonstop for hours. Real mountain rain, thick and relentless, hammering the windshield hard enough to dull your sense of speed. Fog hung low between the trees, drifting across the road in slow sheets. The forest on both sides felt dense, ancient, like it had been growing there long before asphalt ever cut through it. My truck, a Peterbilt 579, felt solid beneath me. Engine steady, tires humming, heater pushing warm air into my boots. Inside the cab smelled like diesel, damp clothes, and burnt coffee that had been reheated one too many times. My CB had been dead quiet since nightfall. No chatter, no road calls, just static when I checked. I told myself I'd pull in, shut down for 20 minutes, wash my face, reset my eyes. Then I'd roll again. The exit ramp appeared suddenly, narrow and slick. I eased off the throttle and followed it as it curved into the trees. The forest swallowed the highway noise almost immediately. My headlights caught reflective posts and wet leaves. Nothing else. Then the rest stop lights came into view. They glowed warm and yellow through the rain, hanging low on tall poles, illuminating a small lot and a single low building. The light looked wrong somehow, not dim, not flickering, but too steady, like it didn't belong to the storm around it. I pulled in slowly. No other trucks, no cars. That alone wasn't impossible. It was late, and weather like this scares off casual drivers, but it didn't sit right. Most Appalachian rest areas still have at least one rig idling, especially in bad rain. As I rolled to a stop, the rain changed. Not stopped, just muted, like someone had turned it down. The hammering on the roof softened to a distant hiss. The forest beyond the lights looked darker now, thicker, like the glow couldn't reach it. I set my brakes. The air hissed loudly, too loudly in the quiet lot. The engine idled, vibrating through the cab. I sat there for a moment, listening. No wind in the trees, no distant traffic, just my truck breathing. I grabbed my jacket and stepped down. The air felt heavy, cool but not cold. Rain beaded on my sleeves but didn't soak through right away. The smell of wet earth was strong, fresh, almost sweet. The building door opened without a sound. Inside, the restrooms were spotless. Too spotless. No puddles tracked in. No paper towels on the floor. The sinks were dry. The mirrors didn't fog when I leaned close and breathed on them. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, steady and bright. No sound of dripping water. No ventilation fan. No echo of rain on the roof. Felt sealed off. I washed my hands anyway. The water came out warm immediately, no sputter, no air. When I shut it off, the silence felt heavier than before. I checked my phone. Black screen. I tapped it. Nothing. I held the power button. No vibration. No glow. That caught my attention more than anything else so far. The phone had been at 80% when I pulled in. Cold drains batteries, but not like that, and not instantly. I slid it back into my pocket and headed out. The lot looked exactly the same as when I'd left it. My truck sat alone under the lights. Rain still falling, but softer now. Quieter. The forest beyond the pavement felt closer, like it had edged inward while I wasn't looking. I climbed back into the cab and shut the door, sealing myself inside familiar noise and vibration. The dash lights glowed soft green. Everything looked normal. I checked the clock on the dash. 1:42 a.m. 2 minutes. That didn't make sense. I'd been inside longer than that. I replayed it in my head. Walking in, washing up, standing there listening to the silence. Felt like 10 minutes at least. I shook it off and put the truck in gear. That's when I noticed the headlights. At first, I thought it was reflection. Rain catching light wrong through the trees. Then my eyes adjusted. Deep in the forest, beyond the reach of the lot lights, dozens of headlights stared back at me. Not moving, not flickering, just parked, engines off, facing the rest stop. Trucks. I could make out the squared shapes of cabs between the trees, barely visible, Peterbilts, Freightliners, older rigs too. They were arranged haphazardly, like they'd pulled off the road wherever they could and shut down. My stomach tightened. No driver doors open. No running lights. No exhaust steam. Just headlights. Watching. My cab felt suddenly too warm. Sweat prickled along my spine. I eased my foot onto the accelerator. The headlights didn't move. I backed out slowly, tires hissing on wet pavement. The moment my truck crossed the edge of the lot, the rain came back full force, slamming the cab like it had been waiting. I didn't look back again. I took the on-ramp fast, merged onto the highway, and kept accelerating until the forest thinned enough that I could breathe again. My GPS chimed, recalculating. I glanced down. The map showed my route clearly, but the rest stop behind me was marked in gray. I tapped it, permanently closed. I frowned, eyes flicking between the road and the screen. That couldn't be right. I'd just been there. Lights on, water running, clean restrooms. A mile marker flashed past my windshield. The rain blurred it, but I caught the number. Same as the exit I'd taken. I drove another 10 miles before I dared slow down. The next rest area, clearly marked, clearly open, had trucks lined up along the curb, engines idling, drivers inside waiting out the storm. The noise alone was a relief. I pulled in and shut down. Inside the building, it smelled like disinfectant, wet clothes, and coffee. Paper towels overflowed. Mirrors were fogged. Water dripped from the sinks. Normal. I asked the attendant, a heavy-set man with a tired face, about the other rest stop. He stopped typing. "Which one?" he asked. I gave him the mile marker. His expression tightened. "That one's been closed for years," he said. "Storm damage. Sinkholes. Whole section unstable." "I just stopped there," I said quietly. He shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't." I told him what I'd seen. The lights, the building, the trucks in the woods. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Back when it was open," he said, "there was a storm like this. Landslides, flooding. 6 truckers pulled in overnight." My chest tightened. "Morning came," he continued. "Rest stop was empty. Trucks gone. No sign of them anywhere." "Where'd they go?" I asked. He swallowed. Logbooks showed all 6 stopped there. Same night. Same weather. I didn't sleep much after that. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the records. He was right. 6 disappearances. Same rest stop. Same kind of storm. Closed permanently after. I still run Appalachia. But when rain hits hard and the forest closes in, I ignore the signs that promise relief. Because some rest stops never closed. They're just waiting. Rain in British Columbia doesn't fall like it does in the city. Out there, on those forest passes where the mountains squeeze the road into a thin black ribbon. It comes down heavy and cold, like the sky is dumping weight. It hits your hood and trailer roof with a hard metallic rattle. It fills the ditches fast. It turns pine needles into slick mats that don't forgive mistakes. That night I was running northbound with a sealed dry van. General freight, nothing hazmat, nothing refrigerated. Palletized product, strapped and braced, paperwork clean. I'd picked up outside Kamloops and was heading toward a warehouse yard near Prince George. Familiar run. Long, lonely, and in weather like that, it makes you feel like your headlights are the only thing keeping you from driving straight into a wall of trees. I've been driving long haul for 11 years. I don't jump at every creak a trailer makes. I know what shifting cargo sounds like. I know what a loose strap looks like when you hit the brakes. I know the difference between a normal rattle and something that's trying to get your attention. My truck was a Volvo VNL. Steady engine, good brakes, nothing quirky. The cab was warm and dim, dash lights low. Wipers running full speed, still losing the fight. The smell inside was diesel and wet wool from my jacket. A cold cup of coffee sat in the holder, tasting like plastic every time I took a sip. The forest pass started right after midnight. No towns, no service, just black tree lines and occasional reflective signs that flared in my lights and vanished. The road rose and fell through curves, and the rain made everything shine. The trailer pulled smooth behind me, stable, no sway, no tug. Then I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy, thump, thump, thump. Not a rattle. Not a bang from a pothole. Not the slap of a strap against a wall. It sounded like someone tapping the inside of the trailer with a fist. My first thought was simple, shifting freight. Maybe a pallet had slid and bumped a wall in a weird rhythm. It happens. The road can make cargo settle in strange ways. I eased off the throttle and listened. The engine hummed steady. The rain hammered the roof. Tires hissed on wet asphalt. Then it happened again. Same rhythm. Same spacing. Thump, thump, thump. I felt my shoulders tighten. I checked my mirrors. Trailer looked fine. Running lights steady. Door seals intact. No sway. I watched the trailer's reflection ripple in the wet road behind me. Everything looked normal. I keyed the CB out of habit. Any drivers northbound through the pass? You hearing anything strange tonight? Only static answered. Thick, empty static. Like the mountains were swallowing signal. I told myself to stop feeding the thought. Fatigue does that. Turns normal noise into patterns. Rain, road, sleep deprivation. I'd seen guys scare themselves half to death in their own heads. I kept rolling. The road tightened into a long curve, trees rising like black walls. My headlights lit the guardrail and the line, and beyond that was nothing but wet darkness. Thump, thump, thump. This time it sounded closer. Not physically closer, the trailer was still 40 feet behind me, but closer in the way a sound changes when it's meant for you. The knocks came through the frame and up into the cab floor. I felt them in my boots. I swallowed hard and stared at the road like it owed me an explanation. Cargo? I said out loud to prove I believed it. Just cargo. The knocks stopped. For a couple miles, there was only the storm. I loosened my grip on the wheel. I let myself breathe again. I started thinking about the drop, the paperwork, the coffee I'd buy at the next fuel stop. Then the knocking returned, one single hit, louder than before. Thump. It wasn't rhythmic this time. It sounded like something had slammed flat against the trailer wall. My hands tightened again. My heart started doing that slow, heavy punch. I checked the mirrors, scanned the shoulder, watched for a safe pullout. Up ahead, a gravel turnout appeared under the trees. One of those small maintenance pullouts barely wide enough for a rig. There were no lights, just darkness and rain. I signaled anyway and eased over, tires crunching onto gravel. The truck rocked slightly as I came to a stop. Air brakes sighed, loud in the quiet. Rain hit my hood and windshield hard. The forest around me looked endless. My headlights washed the trunks in pale bands, but beyond them was black. I sat there with the engine idling, listening. Nothing. No knocking. No movement. That felt worse somehow, like whatever made the sound was waiting to see what I'd do. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down into the rain. Cold hit immediately. My boots sank into wet gravel. The smell out there was sharp, pine, mud, wet bark. Rain ran down my neck. The beam of my flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the mist. I walked back alongside the trailer, running my hand over the metal. It was slick and cold. No dents. No obvious damage. The seal was intact. I stood at the doors and listened. Nothing but rain. I broke the seal. That's the part people don't understand. How hard it is to do that in the middle of nowhere. Breaking a seal is paperwork, accusations, delays. But I'd rather explain a broken seal than explain why I ignored knocks that sounded like a person. The metal latch clanked under my hands. The doors opened stiffly, and the smell of cardboard and plastic drifted out. Dry, clean, normal. My flashlight beam swept the inside. Everything was exactly how it should be. Pallets strapped. Load bars in place. Wrapped tight. No collapsed stacks. No loose freight. No signs of movement. I stepped up and ran the light along the floor. No footprints. No scuffs. I backed out, rain soaking my jacket, and shut the doors again. The latch clicked solid. For a moment, I felt stupid. Wet, cold, standing in the dark like I just checked for monsters in a perfectly normal trailer. I turned toward the cab. That's when the knocking started again. Not from deep inside. Not from far back. From right behind the doors. Thump, thump, thump. Same slow rhythm. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my throat. I spun back, hand on the latch, but I didn't open it this time. I just stood there with rain running down my face, staring at cold metal like it might bulge outward. The knocks came again, harder. Thump, thump, thump. Then something scraped. A long drag across the inside wall, like nails or a palm sliding across condensation. I stepped back without meaning to. My boots slid on wet gravel. The flashlight beam wobbled. I didn't yell, didn't say anything dramatic. My mind went blank in a practical way, the way it does when it decides survival comes first and questions can wait. I got back in the cab fast, slammed the door, and locked it like that mattered. The cab felt too warm now. My breath came quick. I pulled back onto the highway, tires throwing spray, engine pulling strong. And the knocking followed me. Every 10 minutes. Every 5. Sometimes it came in that slow rhythm. Sometimes it came in one heavy slam that made my mirrors shake. The worst part was how consistent it became, like it was keeping pace with my thoughts. When I tried to ignore it, it got louder. When I checked my mirrors, it stopped. When I relaxed, it returned. I drove with my eyes fixed forward and my jaw clenched until it ached. At one point, I tried turning up the radio to drown it out. The music sounded thin and distant, swallowed by the storm. The knocking cut through it anyway. By 4 a.m., fog thickened and the road narrowed again. The forest felt closer. The cab's warmth felt claustrophobic. Outside was black and wet and endless. I started noticing things in my mirrors. Shapes that didn't hold form. Shadows that looked like they were clinging to the trailer roofline. I told myself it was rain distortion and fatigue. Then I heard it, just once. Not a knock. A soft, muffled sound from behind, like a palm pressing against metal. And then a slow slide, like something moving across the ceiling of the trailer. I didn't stop again. I pushed through to the warehouse yard as dawn started to gray the sky. Rain had eased into a steady drizzle by then, but the air still felt heavy. The yard lights were bright and harsh. The normal noise of forklifts and idling rigs felt like a lifeline. I backed into the dock door, air brakes hissing, trailer bumping the rubber seal. When I climbed down, my legs felt shaky, like I'd been holding tension in them for hours. The dock supervisor met me at the paperwork window, a broad-shouldered guy with a shaved head and tired eyes. He looked at my seal tag, noticed it was broken and replaced, and raised an eyebrow. "Everything good?" he asked. "Load's fine," I said. My voice came out steady, but my throat felt tight. Had to check it. Thought something shifted. He nodded like he'd heard that 100 times. "We'll take it from here." I stood off to the side under the awning while they opened the trailer. The moment the dock door rolled up and the trailer doors swung wide, the supervisor's face changed. Not surprise. Fear. He went pale so fast it looked like the blood drained out of him. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out at first. "Hey!" I said, stepping closer. "What is it?" He raised a hand, palm out, like he was stopping me from coming any closer. "Don't," he whispered. I looked past him into the trailer. The inside walls were covered in handprints. Not clean prints, not smudges from loading. These were wet, muddy impressions smeared through a film of condensation on the walls. Drag marks ran in long streaks, like something had pulled itself along. There was only one set, one size, and they weren't on the floor. They started at shoulder height and went up, all the way to the ceiling. Then I saw the worst part. On the ceiling, centered above the first pallet, were prints that looked like palms pressed flat, fingers splayed, like someone had been hanging there, holding on. The supervisor swallowed hard. He didn't look at me. He kept staring into the trailer like he was seeing a memory. "You drove through the pass in rain," he said quietly. I didn't answer. He nodded to himself like that was enough. "Storm nights," he muttered. "They show up on storm nights." I backed away from the dock without thinking, heart hammering, rain dripping from the awning edge onto the pavement. Behind me, the trailer sat open and lit, clean freight inside, and those prints clinging above it like proof that something had been riding with me the whole way. I signed the paperwork with a shaking hand and left the yard without looking back. I still haul through British Columbia. I still drive passes in rain, but I don't break seals in the dark anymore. And when the trailer roof starts to sound like it's being tapped from the inside, I turn the radio off and listen, because if it knocks 3 times, slow and steady, it's not cargo. It was one of those nights where the rain doesn't just fall. It warps the world. Past midnight, southern route, long forest corridor with no towns close enough to throw light into the trees. The kind of highway where your headlights feel like they're dragging a tunnel behind you, and everything outside that tunnel is just wet black pressure. I was running a drive-in eastbound, mixed freight, nothing special. 10 years behind the wheel, maybe more depending on how you count it. Company years, owner-op years, years where you live out of the sleeper and time stops feeling normal. That night, I was in my Cascadia. Dash lights dimmed, heater humming around my boots. The cab smelled like diesel and stale coffee and damp fabric. Wipers on high, still losing. Rain hit the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. Fog sat low between the trees, drifting across the asphalt like smoke. No CB chatter, no passing rigs. Just the steady pull of the engine, the hiss of tires on wet road, and the occasional soft sigh of air as I feathered the brakes through curves. I was thinking about nothing. That's the dangerous part. When you're not thinking, just moving, eyes locked on the reflective line, mind floating somewhere behind your skull. Then something stepped into my lane. Not a deer, not a raccoon, not that quick darting movement you get from animals. Person, a man. Right out of the rain, so sudden I didn't even have time to swear. Just a shape in the beam, shoulders hunched, arms low. His clothes looked dark and heavy, like they were soaked through. He moved slow, like he didn't care what was coming. I hit the brake hard, but wet pavement doesn't negotiate with physics. The trailer tugged. The ABS chattered under my foot. I felt the truck start to drift. I did the only thing you're trained to do when stopping isn't an option. I swerved. The wheel jerked left then back right, controlled but violent, my whole cab rocking. Tires screamed on water. The trailer followed with that delayed wait that always makes your stomach drop. I saw the man in the corner of my vision, so close I could have touched him through the glass. And I missed him. I know I missed him because my headlights cleared him and there was nothing in the lane. But I felt the impact anyway. Not the crunch of a body, not the thud of bone on bumper. A dull, heavy bump that came up through the frame and into the steering column, like I'd rolled over a thick branch or a rock, or something that shouldn't have been there. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the wheel tighter just to keep the truck straight. Heart pounding in my throat, breath hot in my mouth. I got the rig under control and eased onto the shoulder as soon as the road gave me space. Flashers on. Air brakes hissing loud in the rain as I came to a stop. For a moment, I just sat there staring into the wiper-smeared darkness, listening to my engine idle and my own heartbeat. Then I grabbed my jacket and stepped out. Cold rain hit my face instantly, soaking my hair, running down my neck. The forest smelled sharp, wet bark, mud, crushed leaves. My boots splashed in shallow water on the shoulder. I walked back along my truck, scanning the road with my flashlight. Beam jittering because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Hey!" I shouted once, more reflex than hope. "You all right?" The rain ate my voice. I checked the lane where he'd been. The shoulder. The ditch line where the weeds dipped into blackness. Nothing. No body. No blood. No torn fabric. No dragged marks in the wet gravel. Just shining asphalt and falling rain. I paced a wider circle, eyes sweeping the tree line like I expected someone to rise out of it. Still nothing. That's when my brain tried to fix it for me, tried to patch the hole in reality. Maybe it was a shadow, a signpost, a tree branch caught in the wind. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I felt. I went back to the cab with water pouring off my sleeves and that sick hollow feeling in my stomach that only comes when you're certain you did something irreversible. I climbed in and shut the door. The cab sealed, warm air hitting my wet clothes, turning the inside into a damp, heated box. I sat there breathing hard, staring at my steering wheel, trying to slow my hands. Then I looked to my right. The passenger seat was wet, not damp from humidity, not a small spot from a dripping sleeve. Wet like someone had sat down in it soaked through. The fabric was darkened in a human shape, backrest and seat cushion, like a person had been pressed there for a while. My throat went tight. I hadn't put anything on that seat. My jacket was on me. My cup was in the holder. No reason for that seat to be wet. I turned my head slowly toward the windshield again, forcing my eyes forward like looking away could make the thought go away. And that's when I realized something worse. The cab smelled different. Not diesel. Not coffee. Wet leaves. And rust. That metallic old smell you get around abandoned tools or train tracks after rain. I swallowed and looked back at the passenger seat. A man was sitting there. No door sound. No movement. Just there. His clothes were soaked and heavy. Rainwater dripped off him onto the floor mat. His face didn't look injured exactly. No blood, no cuts. But it looked wrong, like it wasn't fully solid. Like his features had been softened by water. His skin looked pale under the dash glow, but not healthy pale. More like something left in the rain too long. His eyes were open, but he wasn't looking at me. He stared straight ahead into the windshield, as if the road was still moving under us. I couldn't move. My body locked up the way it does when something breaks your understanding of what's possible. The wipers kept sweeping. The heater kept humming. My engine idled steady. Normal sounds surrounding something that wasn't. The man didn't blink. He didn't breathe like a living person. Not chest rising, not shoulders shifting. He just sat there with water sliding down his jaw and dripping off his fingertips. My mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Finally, I forced a sound. "Who are you?" His lips moved slowly, like they were remembering how. When he spoke, his voice was soft and hoarse, like it came through wet cloth. "You didn't stop last time either." My stomach dropped. "What?" I whispered. He turned his head just slightly, not toward me, not fully, just enough that I saw his profile under the dash glow. His face looked blurred, like it was still underwater, like the rain had melted the edges of him, and he smiled without showing teeth. "You swerved," he said, "just like you did before." I stared at him, mind scrambling. "I've never." He raised one wet hand and pointed forward, out past the windshield, into the rain. "Same trees," he whispered. "Same sound. Same hurry." A cold wave rolled through me, and my hands started shaking again, worse than before, because suddenly my memory coughed up something I hadn't thought about in years. Another storm, another forest route, another late-night run where something stepped into the road and I swerved without stopping because I was running behind. I told myself it was a deer. I told myself there was no impact. I told myself I imagined it. The man in my passenger seat sat perfectly still, water dripping steadily, eyes fixed ahead. "Get out," I managed, voice thin. "Get out of my truck." His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to the engine, like he could hear the road inside it. Then he leaned a fraction closer, and I caught that rust smell stronger, old metal, old blood without the sweetness. "You checked the road," he murmured. "Same as last time." My throat tightened. "What do you want?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said almost gently, "You never looked up." The cab lights flickered once. Just a stutter. My dash dimmed and brightened, like the truck had inhaled. I blinked instinctively, and when my eyes opened, the passenger seat was empty. Wet fabric still darkened in the shape of him. Water still dripping onto the floor mat. The rust smell lingering like a stain. But he was gone. I sat frozen for a long time, listening to the wipers and the rain, afraid to even breathe too loud. Then I did what drivers do when reality starts slipping. I made it practical. I pulled back onto the highway, kept moving, because stopping in the dark with your thoughts is how you lose the fight. I drove to the next fuel stop like it was a destination in a war zone. Eyes forward, mirrors checked too often, jaw clenched until it hurt. The rain stayed heavy the whole way. The forest never opened. When I finally saw the bright canopy lights of the truck stop, it felt unreal. Too bright, too normal. I pulled in, parked under the lights, and shut down. My hands were still shaking when I reached for the dashcam screen. I needed proof. Not for anyone else, for me. The dashcam had been recording. Timestamp running. Video preview showing the road, until the exact moment I swerved. At that point, the screen froze. Black. Not a file corruption message. Not a glitch. Just missing footage. I scrolled back and forth. Everything before it was fine. Everything after it was fine. But right where the man stepped into my lane, where I felt the impact, there was nothing. Then I checked the audio. Audio was still there. I pressed play. Rain hissed. Engine hummed. ABS chattered. My breath came fast as I swerved. Then silence. One hard second where even the rain sounded far away. And in that silence, the mic picked up something close. Breathing. Not mine. Too slow. Too wet. Right beside me. I paused it and listened again. Finger trembling. The breathing stayed there, intimate and near, like someone was leaning toward the dashcam from the passenger seat. Then a whisper. So soft I almost missed it. You didn't stop. I shut the audio off and sat back in the driver's seat, staring at the windshield while the truck stop lights buzzed overhead. All around me, drivers walked in and out of the store, laughing, talking, living in a world that made sense. My cab still smelled faintly of wet leaves and rust. And on my passenger seat, the fabric was still wet in the shape of a man who wasn't there. I drive that southern route less now. And when rain comes down hard enough to bend the world, I slow way down. Not because I'm afraid of hitting someone, because I'm afraid of what gets in when you don't. The first time you see a way station in the wrong place, your brain tries to fix it for you. Tells you you're tired. Tells you the rain is messing with your depth. Tells you there's a detour and you missed a sign. Because the alternative, accepting that the road has shown you something that shouldn't exist, isn't useful at 80,000 pounds. That night I was running north through a forest stretch I'd driven before. Same corridor, same long climbs, same wet black curves that seem to tighten when the weather turns. I had a sealed drive and behind me, general freight, nothing special. Dispatch wanted it moved. The customer wanted it early. I wanted the miles. It was after 2 a.m. Rain came down in hard sheets, dense enough that my wipers couldn't clear the glass so much as smear it. The trees on both sides were tall and packed tight, dark firs and pines that swallowed light. Fog sat low in the dips, and every time my headlights hit it, the beam turned into a pale wall. Inside my cab was warm and dim, heater humming at my feet. Dash lights turned down low to save my night vision. The smell was diesel, wet fabric, stale coffee in a cup that had been reheated into bitterness. The engine had that steady pull that keeps you calm even when the world outside looks like it's trying to erase itself. CB was dead quiet. No chatter. No warnings. Just that thin hiss when you keyed up. I'd just come off a long downhill grade when I saw the lights. At first I thought it was a rest area or a truck stop sign reflecting wrong. Then the glow sharpened between the trees, bright white overhead lamps, the kind mounted on tall poles. A low building, a gate, reflective signage. Way station open. I frowned. That didn't fit my memory. That stretch was usually empty. No services, no scales until much further north. But the sign was there, clear, lit, and the gates were open. A way station sitting in the forest like it had been planted there. I eased off the throttle more out of habit than obedience. In heavy rain, you don't blow past an open scale unless you want a problem later. Portable enforcement, cameras, random audits, anything's possible. Still, something about it felt off. The approach lane was clean, too clean. No puddles. No standing water. The pavement looked almost dry under the lamps despite the rain hammering everywhere else. My tires hissed as I rolled onto it, and the sound changed, like the ground itself was different. The booth sat to the left of the scale. Small windows, light inside. I could see a figure in there, an officer, silhouette only. He didn't step out. He didn't wave with his arm. He just raised his hand in the glass and pointed at the scale platform, slow and deliberate, like he was directing a sleepwalker. I rolled forward until my steer axle hit the platform. The truck's suspension shifted. The trailer tugged gently behind me. Rain drummed the cab roof in a constant metallic rattle. Then everything else got quiet. Not silent. My engine still idled. The rain still fell. But the space around the way station felt muffled, like the forest had wrapped it in insulation. No wind, no distant highway noise, no insects, nothing beyond the steady present moment of my truck sitting on that scale. A speaker crackled above my driver's side window. "Hold." The voice was calm, flat, not unfriendly but not normal either. It had no strain from the speaker, no distortion like most way stations. Sounded too clear, like he was sitting in my cab. "Copy," I answered, keeping it professional. "Unit number and company if you need it." A pause. Then he asked, "What did they call you when you were 7? My hands tightened on the wheel. I stared at the booth window. "Say again." The speaker popped softly, like someone clearing a throat. "What did they call you?" The voice repeated slower. "When you were 7 years old, rain ran in thick streams down my windshield. My wipers swept and squealed. The heater blew warm air that suddenly felt stale." "That's not," I started, then stopped. "This is a way station. You need my DOT and paperwork." Another pause. Too long. Then, "Your father's rig number." My stomach dropped so hard it felt like the floor moved. My father had driven long haul before me. Old school. The kind of driver who knew routes by smell and could back a trailer into a hole without touching his mirrors. I knew his rig number the way you know an old phone number, etched into muscle memory from childhood. I hadn't said it out loud in years. I swallowed and forced my voice to stay steady. "Officer, I need your badge ID." The lights overhead flickered. Not a full blackout, just a stutter, bright to dim to bright again. In that flicker, the booth window looked empty for a split second. Then the light stabilized and the silhouette was back. The speaker crackled again. "The date you first drove alone." My skin prickled under my shirt. My mouth went dry. I didn't answer. I looked down at my dash. Everything normal. Air pressure good. Engine temp fine. Fuel steady. Then my eyes landed on the scale display board ahead. Big digital numbers that should have been reading my axle weights. Flashed and settled. 0, 0. Like I wasn't there. Like the truck and trailer, 80,000 pounds of steel and freight, had become air. A cold, irrational thought hit me. If the scale says I'm not here, then maybe I'm not on the road anymore. I keyed the CB without thinking, trying to punch through the quiet. "Breaker, anyone on this scale tonight? Anybody reading this?" Only static, thin and distant, like the mountains had pushed the signal away. The speaker above my window popped again. "Don't leave," the voice said softly. It didn't sound like an order. It sounded like advice or warning. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stared at the booth window. The silhouette didn't move. No face, no detail, just a dark human shape inside a lit box in the forest. Rain kept falling, but the world around the way station felt frozen. No gusts, no sway in the trees, no shifting shadows. I thought about my father, about stories he'd told, drivers vanishing in bad weather, rigs found empty, doors locked from the inside. Stories I'd laughed at when I was younger. Stories that felt less funny at 2 a.m. in a place that shouldn't exist. I did what training tells you to do when something feels unsafe. Get moving. I eased my foot onto the accelerator. The engine note rose slightly. The truck rocked. The speaker snapped with static. "You'll regret that." The lights flickered again, harder this time. In the brief dimness, the booth looked burned. Not charred like a campfire, burned like a structure that had been cooked from the inside out. Dark streaks climbed the walls. The window looked cracked and blackened. Then the lights came back and everything looked clean again. My hands shook once, violently, then steadied. I didn't ask for clearance. I didn't call dispatch. I rolled forward off the scale and kept going. As my trailer cleared the platform, the rain sound changed again. Louder, realer, like I'd broken through a membrane. Wind slapped the side of my cab. The trees started moving again. The highway noise returned faintly. In my mirror, the way station lights were still there, glowing between the trunks. Then they weren't. Not fading, not shrinking with distance. Just gone. Like I'd driven past a turn in reality and it didn't follow. I drove hard for another hour, not stopping, not slowing, eyes scanning for familiar landmarks to prove I was still on the same route. When I finally hit a stretch with cell service, my phone lit up with delayed notifications like it had been holding its breath too. I called dispatch as soon as I could. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice level. "You got an open way station on the forest stretch tonight?" Mile marker. I gave the closest one I remembered. There was a pause on the other end. Then my dispatcher, who'd heard every excuse and every weird road story a driver could tell, said quietly, "What way station?" "The one in the forest," I said. "Lights on, open sign, officer in the booth." Silence. Then, "That station burned down 15 years ago." I felt my grip tighten around the phone. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," he said. His voice had gone careful now, like he was reading something. "It's on record. Storm night. Electrical fire. 3 officers trapped inside." My stomach turned. "No bodies recovered," he added lower. "They sealed the site. It's not even on our routing maps anymore." I stared out my windshield at the wet road ahead. The forest still pressing in. Rain still falling like the sky had a grudge. "Then what did I just roll through?" I asked. Dispatch didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, he said, "Some drivers claim they see it when storms hit hard enough. They say it asks questions it shouldn't know." My throat tightened. "Why?" Another pause. "Maybe," he said quietly, "it's still trying to log the ones who never made it out." I didn't tell him about the scale reading 0. I didn't tell him about the booth looking burned when the lights flickered. I didn't tell him about that voice asking for pieces of my life like it had been standing beside me since childhood. I finished the run and delivered the load. Smiled, signed paperwork, acted normal. But I don't pass way stations the same way anymore. Because sometimes, in heavy rain, deep in the trees, you'll see a sign that says open. And if you pull in, it won't weigh your truck. It'll weigh you. It started the way most bad nights start on the road. Quietly, with little things that don't add up until they're already stacked too high. I was running a late forest route, one of those stretches where the highway cuts through dense trees for miles without a single town bright enough to soften the darkness. It was after midnight. Rain was coming down hard outside, hammering the windshield and the hood, turning the road into a black mirror that reflected my headlights back at me in long, broken streaks. I've been driving long haul for years. I know my truck. I know the noises it makes, the way it feels when the tires hit standing water, the way the cab shifts when wind hits the trailer broadside. That night, my rig was steady. Freightliner, dry van, sealed load, nothing special. Heater on low. Dash lights dimmed. Coffee cooling in the cup holder, tasting like burnt plastic every time I took a sip. The forest was a wall on both sides. Tall trunks, no underbrush you could see, just darkness pressed tight around the road. Fog drifted in and out of the beams like slow smoke. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not diesel, not coffee, not wet asphalt. A cold, damp smell, like an old basement after a storm, like stagnant water that had sat too long. It didn't make sense because the cab was sealed. Windows up, vents on recirculate, no leaks, no drafts. I told myself it was my jacket. Maybe I'd tracked in rain at the last stop. Maybe the floor mat had stayed damp and warmed up enough to release that smell. Then I felt my boot shift. The floor mat under my heel was slick. I looked down. Water was pooling on the rubber mat by the pedals. Not a few drops. A shallow spread, dark and glossy, wobbling slightly with the vibration of the engine. My first thought was practical. Heater core leak, AC drain backing up, something mechanical. But the water wasn't warm. It wasn't coming from the dash. It was just there, as if it had been slowly filling while I wasn't paying attention. I lifted my foot and pressed it down again. Cold water squished under the sole. I leaned forward, eyes flicking between the road and the floor, trying to see where it was coming from. The pedals were dry. The firewall looked normal. No dripping from under the dash. Outside, rain slammed the windshield in a constant roar. Inside, that water sat too calmly, like it belonged. I wiped my hand across the edge of the mat. My fingers came back wet and cold. The smell rose stronger. Mildew and something metallic underneath it, faint like rust. I swallowed and forced my focus back on the road. That's when a drop hit the back of my neck. Just one. Cold enough to make my skin tighten. I reached up without taking my eyes off the windshield and touched the collar of my shirt. Wet. A second drop followed. Then a third. Slow, steady, like a leaking pipe. I glanced up toward the cab ceiling. The headliner above me was darkened in an uneven patch, like it had absorbed water. A thin bead formed at the edge of that patch, swelled, and fell, right onto my shoulder. My chest tightened. I stared at it, and another bead formed, slow, deliberate, like the ceiling was breathing water. This didn't happen in my truck. Not ever. No sunroof. No roof vent open. No reason for a leak. And even if it was a leak, it wouldn't start like this, out of nowhere, in the middle of a storm with the cab sealed. I turned the interior light on. The headliner was wet in a wide circle, spreading outward from somewhere above the driver's seat. The fabric sagged slightly, heavy with water. A thin stream ran along the seam and dripped down. I felt my pulse quicken. I turned the light back off like darkness could make it less real. The radio crackled then, not a station, not a voice, just static. But it didn't sound like normal CB hiss. It had texture, like overlapping breath, like whispering pushed through white noise. I reached for the volume knob. The static changed as my fingers touched it, rising slightly in pitch, almost reacting. My breath fogged in front of me. That made no sense. The heater was on. The cab was warm. But when I exhaled, a pale cloud bloomed and hung longer than it should have. The temperature dropped fast, not slowly, not gradually. 1 minute my hands were warm on the wheel, the next my fingers felt stiff, like the heat had been drained from the cab. My skin goosebumped under my shirt. The wet on my neck felt icy. I glanced at the temp gauge. Normal. I glanced at the road. The rain outside had become a gray curtain, thick enough that my headlights didn't cut through so much as disappear into it. The trees on either side were vague black shapes, sliding past like a tunnel closing in. Then water started running down the inside of the windshield. At first I thought it was just condensation, fogging from my breath. But it wasn't fog. It was liquid, clear streaks forming high on the glass and sliding downward, slow and heavy, like someone had poured water on the inside. I blinked hard. The streaks didn't stop. Then one of them moved upward, against gravity. It crawled toward the top of the windshield like a living thing climbing. My stomach turned cold. I didn't think. I reacted. I slammed the brakes. ABS chattered. The trailer tugged. My body lurched forward against the belt. Tires hissed on wet asphalt as the truck slowed hard, and for a split second everything outside the cab went weightless. Forest, rain, road, like the world had paused with me. The moment the truck stopped, the cab went silent. The whisper static died instantly. The dripping stopped. The streak on the windshield froze where it was, then vanished as if it had never existed. I sat there with my hands locked on the wheel, chest heaving, listening to the rain hammering the roof like it had the whole time. But inside, nothing. No dripping, no static, no cold breath, only my engine idling and the rain outside. I swallowed and forced myself to move. I reached up and touched the headliner. Dry. I pulled my shirt collar away from my neck and touched the fabric. Dry. I looked down at the floor mat. Dry. No pooling water. No slickness. No smell. It was like the last 5 minutes had been erased. I sat there long enough that my hazard lights clicked in a steady rhythm, counting time for me. My hands trembled slightly on the wheel. I kept expecting the dripping to start again the moment I moved. Didn't. I eased back onto the highway and kept going. Slower now. Every sense tuned sharp. Every sound in the cab felt like a signal. The rest of the drive passed without incident, but I didn't relax once. I kept checking the ceiling, checking the floor mat, watching the windshield for any streak that didn't belong. By sunrise, the rain had softened. The forest opened up into rolling hills, and the light made the world feel less hostile. I pulled into the yard for my drop and requested maintenance to check the cab for leaks. Roof seal, door seals, HVAC drain, anything. The mechanic climbed in, checked everything, ran water tests, looked under the dash. He found nothing. No moisture, no stains, no wiring issues. Truck's fine, he said, shrugging. No leaks. I wanted to believe him. I almost did. Until later that day when safety called. They told me my truck's black box had flagged an event. Hard brake, sudden spike. They didn't sound angry, just cautious, like they needed an explanation. Were you avoiding something? The safety manager asked. Animal? Car? No, I said. My voice came out flat. Just bad weather. There was a pause on the line. Here's the weird part, he said slowly. Your speed stayed constant. I gripped the phone tighter. That's not possible. I stopped. I'm reading the data, he said. Speed trace doesn't dip. No deceleration logged. My throat tightened. Then why did it flag? Because your heart rate spiked, he said quietly. I froze. My what? He cleared his throat, like he hadn't expected that reaction either. Your truck's got driver monitoring tied into the seat sensor. It tracks fatigue indicators. It logged your heart rate jumping like you were in a panic. I stared out at the yard, the morning light reflecting off parked trailers. Everything normal, everything clean. So it thinks I panicked, but the truck kept moving, I said. Another pause. Yeah, he answered, like something else was driving. I ended the call and sat in my cab for a long time, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the quiet hum of daytime traffic in the distance. Since then, I've had nights where the rain comes down hard and the forest closes in, and I swear I can smell that cold basement smell again. Stagnant water and rust, before anything else happens. And when it does, I don't fight the wheel. I don't touch the radio. I don't even blink too long, because I learned something on that road. Sometimes the rain isn't outside. Sometimes it's already in the cab with you. A 7.2. It was one of those rain nights where the forest stops looking like a place and starts looking like a shape. You know what I mean if you've driven long enough. When the water turns your windshield into moving glass and your headlights don't reveal things so much as suggest them. The trees become silhouettes, then they become patterns, and patterns are where your brain starts making mistakes. I was running a southern forest route just after midnight, pulling a sealed dry van, general freight. Nothing glamorous. Just miles, paperwork, and a schedule that didn't care about weather. I'd fueled earlier, checked my lights, checked my tires, checked the seal. All normal. I'd even wiped the inside of the windshield because the humidity was turning it hazy. Cab was warm, dim, and familiar. Heater low at my feet. Dash lights turned down. Coffee in the cup holder gone cold. The smell inside was diesel, stale foam seat, and that faint chemical scent of wet road that comes in through tiny cracks even with the windows up. Outside, it was all rain and trees. Tall trunks pressed in tight on both sides, black as tar. The rain hit the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. The wipers slapped and squealed, clearing a brief arc before the glass clouded again. Every reflective sign flashed bright and then disappeared like it never existed. For a while, I drove on instinct, hands steady on the wheel, eyes locked on the right line, mirrors checked on habit. Then the trunks started looking wrong. Not wrong like damaged, wrong like human. The rain distorted the bark into shapes that had shoulders. The branches looked like arms bent at odd angles. The trunks leaned toward the road as if they were listening. I blinked and told myself to stop staring into the trees. Focus on the road. That's what you do. You don't invite your own imagination into the cab. But the harder I tried to ignore it, the more the forest seemed to lean in. And then I saw a face. Not a full face. Just two dark knots in the bark that lined up like eyes, and a pale strip of lichen that looked like teeth. A grin. It was on a trunk just beyond my headlight beam, caught in that half-light where your brain fills in the gaps. I looked away immediately, like you do when you don't want to give something permission to exist. A mile later, I saw it again. Different tree. Same eyes. Same grin. It wasn't a real face, couldn't be. It was bark and shadow and rain. But the shape was too consistent. Too intentional. My throat tightened. I turned the radio up, some late-night station playing weak music through static. The sound filled the cab, thin and tinny, but it helped. A little. Then the rain intensified. Not gradually, not naturally. It hit harder, faster, like someone turned a dial. The sound on the roof and windshield became a constant drumming, loud enough to drown out the radio. It didn't sound like rain anymore. It sounded like applause. My hands tightened on the wheel. I swallowed and forced my eyes forward. The CB was dead quiet. I keyed it anyway. Any southbound or northbound through this corridor? You reading me? Only hiss. No voices. No laughter. No bored truckers. Just empty static like the mountains had swallowed the signal. The face appeared again. This time it wasn't one trunk. It was everywhere I looked. Little suggestions of eyes and grins in the bark, in the wet shine, in the way the headlights slid over uneven wood. Every tree looked like him. Same eyes. Same grin. No matter where I glanced, it followed like a pattern glued to the edges of my vision. I try to trick drivers use when fatigue starts playing games. Narrate what's real. Right line, I muttered. Curve ahead. Speed steady. Trailer stable. It helped for maybe 30 seconds. Then my headlights caught movement beside my truck. At first I thought it was a deer running the shoulder. Then I saw the outline of a man. Right beside my cab, just outside the passenger window, matching my speed. My heart lurched so hard it felt like it hit my ribs. He was close enough that I could see his face through the rain blur. And it was the same face from the bark. Same eyes. Same grin. Except now it wasn't bark. It was skin, pale, slick with rain. His mouth was stretched too wide. Lips thin. Teeth showing like he was smiling for a camera. The worst part wasn't the grin. It was his feet. They weren't touching the ground. He moved like he was running, legs pumping, but his shoes hovered inches above the wet shoulder as if he was skimming it. No splashes, no slips, no impact, just motion, keeping pace with 45 tons of truck in a storm. My whole body went cold. The cab suddenly felt too small, too warm, like the air didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't say anything dramatic. I did what training and instinct tell you to do when something appears where it shouldn't. I accelerated. The engine note rose. The truck surged forward. Spray kicked up behind my trailer. The man stayed with me effortlessly. His grin widened. Not in a human way. More like the skin around his mouth stretched beyond what it should. His cheeks didn't move right. His eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking, like glass. He raised one hand slowly, palm open, and pressed it against the outside of my passenger window. I heard nothing through the glass. No tap, no thump. But the moment his palm touched the window, the inside of the cab fogged. Not the windshield from my breath. The side window. Fog blossomed outward from where his hand was, as if cold had radiated through the glass. A smear appeared in the fog, like fingers dragging. My throat closed. I forced myself not to look at him, not directly, because something in me believed that if I met his eyes too long, I'd lose more than focus. I kept my eyes forward and pushed harder. The rain drummed like applause. The trees watched. The face in the bark multiplied. Every trunk now seemed to have those eyes, that grin, like the forest itself was wearing his expression. And the man beside my cab smiled wider, as if the whole place was enjoying my panic. My exit was supposed to be 20 miles ahead, but the sign that appeared was wrong. It wasn't the usual reflective green. It was a pale, almost white sign, the letters faint under rain. For a second I couldn't read it. Then my eyes caught the word. Just that. No route number. No town name. Just out. I didn't question it. I couldn't afford to. I signaled and took the ramp like it was the only rope out of deep water. The moment my tires crossed the ramp line, the rain sound changed again. Less like applause, more like normal rainfall. The forest opened slightly, trees thinning, the road widening. I glanced to my right. The man was still there, floating, running, grinning. Then the ramp curved sharply and my truck leaned. When I straightened out again and checked the passenger side, he was gone. No fading, no trailing behind, no disappearing into mist, just gone. And the trees were just trees again. Trunks, bark, wet wood. No faces, no eyes, no grins. I didn't stop until I hit a fuel station in a small town with real streetlights and real people behind glass. I parked under the canopy, engine idling, hands shaking on the wheel. The normal smell of gasoline and hot food from inside the store hit my nose when I cracked the window, and I realized I'd been holding my breath for miles. I checked my dashcam the moment I had enough steadiness in my hands to tap the screen. The footage was there. Rain, road, headlights, forest. Then the part where my eyes had started seeing faces in the bark. The camera didn't show them clearly at first, just the way light hit trunks. But then I scrubbed forward to the moment the man appeared beside my cab. The video stuttered, not froze, not cut. It stuttered like the camera was trying to decide whether it was allowed to record what was happening. Then it played, and my stomach dropped, because the man was there, clearer than I'd seen him through the rain, running beside my truck, feet hovering, grinning into my passenger window. I turned the audio up. No footsteps, no breathing, just rain and engine and that faint static whisper under it, like voices layered beneath the storm. I shut the dashcam off and sat there under the fuel canopy lights, watching other drivers walk past in jackets, laughing, living like the world didn't have edges. Weeks later, at a yard, another driver, older guy, serious, asked me if I ran that forest corridor. I didn't answer fast enough. He showed me his phone. Dashcam footage from the same route, different night, same kind of rain. The face in the trees was real, not a trick of bark, not imagination, a face. High up between trunks, pale and stretched, moving with the truck's motion like it was tracking it. And in the corner of his frame, for half a second, you could see a man beside his trailer, hovering, keeping pace. The older driver looked at me and said quietly, "It's been following trucks for years. I don't run that corridor in heavy rain anymore. And when the forest starts to distort and the trunks start looking too tall, too bent, too human, I don't stare into the trees. Because sometimes the trees aren't pretending to be a man. Sometimes they're showing you who's already there."